and welcome. Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome along once again to another Helium Down Under video. My name is Ian. I am your host for this video, as with most of the content here on the Helium Down Under channel. Guys, this channel is all about helium, HNT, IoT, Internet of Things, with a big flavor for the AU915 LAN Down Under, Australia and New Zealand. If this is your first time that you've popped onto one of our videos, if I could ask you to consider subscribing to the channel, hitting the little bell so that you get notified of all of our new content. And as you go through the video, guys, if you could do me a favor, okay, these videos are not recorded for profit. There's no sponsorship. There's no nothing. So it's just always really nice to know the fact that the content that you're actually recording is actually meeting the needs of the people watching it, that you're getting some sort of enjoyment out of it. So whether it's enjoyment or whether it's knowledge, guys, if I could ask you to hit that thumbs up button. Apparently it doesn't help the YouTube algorithm, as I've always thought that it did, but it doesn't matter anyway. I'd love you to hit that thumbs up button if you could. Now, only a few days ago, I recorded a video and uploaded it, and it was all about 4G internet coverage, about basically getting your hotspot out there on the grid in some sort of off-grid format using a 4G router. Now, the subject of the video wasn't all about solar panels, etc. Whilst there is a picture of a solar panel on our front screen, it is definitely not the content that we're looking to go through here. That will be for a future video. So anyway, guys, let's crack on and let's get into the content. We are going to carry on with the first of our setups in our three options that we covered in the last video. Now, if you did not watch the last video, it is rather important that you do watch that one, because a lot of the information that I'm going to be covering in this particular video is going to leverage off the previous video. So please, there's a link up there, and also you could also go back to all the prior content and look for the one on the 4G setup. But this particular unit tonight that we will be discussing is how to set up your Milesight UR32 for use with your Helium hotspots, regardless of where you've got it, whether it's an off-grid system or whether it's in a location that just has really poor internet, whatever it may be. Guys, this is my preferred option. As discussed in the last video, the UR32 is my prominent router. Whilst I do have some other routers, and I will be covering each of those as well for those that do choose to use them, the Milesight is my preferred option. And I've purchased all of my Milesights from Sam over in the IoT store in Western Australia. If you have got a Sensecap, or if you have a Milesight hotspot, then you've probably already dealt with Sam and you can purchase these. There are a couple of different models of Milesight. There is a Milesight with PoE, Power over Ethernet. There is a non-Wi-Fi version, which I believe is the UR32L, and then there is the UR32. But before we go too far into the content here tonight, as per usual, I like to make sure that you, the viewing audience, know what my objective is, because it really just lays your expectations out from my particular content. Now, my objective is to help you so that you can help all of us by creating a stronger people's network, the IoT network here in Australia. I am definitely not an RF engineer. I do not have any qualifications in the area, nor am I an IoT expert, and I'm definitely not a crypto expert. So, guys, please take the information that I present to you here today. It is all factual information based on my own current experiences. But as with all things in crypto, I really do encourage you and insist that you do your own research. Don't just take the word of a YouTuber for you to actually blindly go out and spend money on whatever you are going to spend it on, whether it's the Helium Down Under channel or any other channel. Always make sure that you do your own research and make sure that you are comfortable with all of the risks that are applicable cryptocurrency space. Okay, let's roll on. Now let's do a bit of a recap here for starters, because this is really important information. As I referred to before, there has been a prior video that I would encourage you to watch for all of the content. But if you've already watched that and you're looking for just a quick summary here, in order to use your Milesight router or any other router for a hotspot, you are going to require a business plan. And those business plans are either Telstra or Optus, and they must be a business plan. A normal SIM will not cut it. A business plan is only available in Australia to people that hold a current ABN, ABRN or ACN. So if you don't have a business or a company, you are going to need to find some other way of getting around that through potentially leveraging off a friend or family who may have those credentials. So once you have you've got your SIM card through the various carrier, there is a critical bit of information here that without this piece of information to be able to put inside your router, unfortunately, router's just not going to work as you would hope it to work. It's going to either be relayed or, in fact, it just may not work at all. And that is you are going to need to apply the APN code. So when you go through the process, and then what we're looking at on the screen here at the moment is obviously Telstra. So once you have gone through the process with the small business account manager and they have applied the MY code, which once again was GPTEXB3, they've added it to your data SIM, and that will enable you to be able to run your hotspot in an unrelayed state. Once you have applied the APN code, and here it is for Telstra, it is always the same as far as I'm aware for all Telstra accounts, but please do always maybe verify this with tech support or the business account manager before you take it as gospel. And the APN code is telstra.extranet. Telstra.extranet. I'll show you where to place that in the router very shortly. But that bit of information is critical. So make sure you've actually got that written down, or it's in an email or whatever it happens to be, because you're going to need that information as you roll forward. Now, for our friends that are using the Optus small business account, your APN is obviously different to Telstra. Your APN code is likely to be Yes Business IP. But I would encourage you to confirm those details with your small business account manager or Optus tech support, because I have identified through a little bit of searching around that there are different APN codes that Optus use for different features. So for now, I'll be covering Yes Business IP. I won't be actually doing a demonstration of applying that APN code in tonight's video. I'll be utilizing a Telstra SIM just because it's the SIM that I have handy here, but it is exactly the same except that the APN is different. So the Milesight UR32 or 32L, and I believe there's another couple of slight variations with PoE, etc., are available through the IoT store. That's where I've purchased my routers from. My Milesight UR32s have come from Sam. I have purchased the units that actually have Wi-Fi enabled in them. So the unit that you will be seeing very shortly on the screen is in fact the one with the antenna. The UR32L that you're looking at on the screen right now does not have Wi-Fi. It is the most affordable of the units, and the price through the IoT store is $219, excluding GST and freight. So if you have dealt with Sam over there at the IoT store, you know he does an amazing job supporting us. He's pretty well single-handedly built or at least supplied most of the hotspots in Australia that makes up the People's Network down under. I just really hope at some point that Sam gets a huge gold star for the effort that he took to, or the risks that he took back at the start to be that first distributor of Helium Hotspots direct from an Australian distributor. Okay, so now we're going to go through the actual setup of the UR32. But, you know, before I sort of go too far, because I know I did say at the start of this video that I am not an RF engineer, nor am I a crypto expert. Well, guys, neither am I a networking expert. In fact, when I first launched into Helium, when I first placed my orders almost 12 months ago, but I guess the first hotspot didn't really arrive until about 6 months ago. It's been a crash course on a lot of the networking that's required. I'd never done a static IP address. I'd never done port forwarding. I'd never really even delved into the back end of my router at any point. So there's been a bit of a learning curve. So if this is really you're still new with Helium, or if a lot of these things, port forwarding and static IP, all sort of sounds like black magic, well, guys, I was sort of exactly where you're sitting not so long ago. And there are two people that I'd like to do a call out to. These two fellas are actually both down in Victoria, which just also happens to be my old hometown. So must be something about Victorians that they have an interest and knowledge in networking. I'm not entirely sure. But my two mates down there are Mäthÿ Vārñäñ. Now, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right, Mäthÿ, and hopefully you do see this. Man, Mäthÿ he must have spent about 2 nights on the internet chat with me, whether it be through Facebook or Discord, I can't recall now, too long ago, but he spent an enormous amount of time actually setting me straight, because I was so confused in this whole static IP business, and it was really Mäthÿ that actually put the light on. And he was also the first person that introduced me to the Milesight UR32 and to most of the functionality that we'll be covering here tonight. So Mäthÿ, who is down there in the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne, down around Cranbourne, Pakenham area. He's got a great little network down there. I think he's up around 10 to a dozen odd hotspots, could be more by now. And the great thing is that almost every single one of Mäthÿ's hotspots is running on 4G, and they're all running incredibly well, just like mine. So guys, this is not a theory that we haven't tested ourselves with great results. The second person that I'd like to do a big call out to here is, now Chris, I'm not actually sure how to pronounce your last name, but I think it's Chris Degering. I'm not entirely sure if I say that right, Chris, but if not, mate, apologize. But Chris actually helped me out the other night in sorting out Optus, because up until only a few days ago, I was of the opinion that Optus didn't work for hotspots, at least not in the way that you could operate them with port forwarding, and so that they were not relayed. I'd completed a month trial using Optus right back at the very start, and I was in the relayed mode. Now, the results were still outstanding, but guys, I'm really trying to promote here building a strong network where we don't rely on relayed units. Of course, with some recent changes in Helium, the whole relayed status may be a thing of the past sometime in the next, I guess, 4 to 6 months. It would be my guess when light hotspots come out. But Chris helped me a lot with Optus. He set me on the right track. I went back to Optus, and you know what? The problem that I've been facing with Optus, that I had made the decision that it didn't work, was in fact because a technical issue at Optus. It actually had nothing to do with what I had done in the unit. But nonetheless, it did work. So a big call out to Mäthÿ and Chris. Guys, top job supporting me so that I can support other people so they can support us all in building this strong network. All right, so what we have in front of us at the moment are the steps that we run through on the Milesight UR32. You may like to take a screenshot right now, but I'll also put this on at the end. What I will be doing is actually sharing my screen in a moment, and we'll be looking at me pairing up a hotspot. The hotspot that I'm going to be pairing up here or matching up is the Heltec. Now, I have this in my office. It was one of my units. Which one is this one? This is Mammoth Wooden Jellyfish, obviously not connected to anything. So I've actually parked this out on an island in Moreton Bay. I don't actually think that I'll ever be using the Heltecs again. Not a fantastic performing unit compared to the Sensecap and to the Milesight. And even a few of the Lynx dot that I do have in my fleet are performing really well compared to the Heltec. So not a huge fan. Doesn't mean they don't work, guys. So if you've got one that's working, good on you. I'm really glad you do, but not a huge fan. But I will be using it for the demonstration tonight. All right, we're just having a look at our hardware before we actually go into the control panel of the Milesight. As you see, this is the Milesight. I have the UR32, which has the Wi-Fi connection. I've also got my Heltec hotspot here. Both of them are currently powered up. And the SIM card, my Telstra SIM, has already been inserted into the micro SD slot. Now, what I need to do is to obviously connect these units via a LAN cable or an Ethernet cable. And there we go here. Now, if you were using the UR32L that does not have the Wi-Fi, you are also going to need to connect a second Ethernet line from there and run it to your computer so that you can access the control panel as I'm about to demonstrate. But in this particular case here, as with all of my with all of my hotspot setups, is I do have Wi-Fi in mind. I just find it makes it a whole lot easier, and I was quite prepared to pay the additional fee. So I right now I have got my hotspot set up. My hotspot, you probably can't see the lights, but my networking lights are running. I've got my blue lights on the front, and it's currently syncing. It's going to be a long way behind because this thing's been turned off for about a week and a half. And on my router here, I have currently got all lights showing except the system light, and the system light is flashing. And that's the normal mode that your router will run in when it is in good condition or you've got good signal. This is it's about my only thing that I don't particularly love about the Milesight is the antenna that they utilize. I would actually prefer to have a second antenna on the unit. But of course, in most cases with the off-grid systems, that gets disconnected, and I do use an antenna, something similar to this one, on the external of the box to maintain good signal. Okay, so now we're going into the control panel. Now, before you can obviously access the control panel, if you are using Ethernet cable, then you would actually have that connected via Ethernet. I'm actually accessing this particular unit via Wi-Fi because I do have the Wi-Fi enabled unit. So for starters, I have already right now connected to the Wi-Fi connected to my router via Wi-Fi. So I'm using it right now. Okay, so as with all technical equipment, they have drivers that are required in the unit to function to their highest capacity or highest capability. Now, the router that you get may in fact have the latest firmware, but I doubt it because I would imagine that most of the routers are actually probably from a build that may in fact already be 12 months old or 18 months old, and the firmware is quite old. So what I would recommend is the best step is to go to the Milesight website and download the software or the firmware relevant to the router that you have, to the UR32 router. Once you've got that on your computer, now we need to actually install that in the unit itself. It's a simple step here. We go into maintenance and we go into upgrade. Upgrade, browse to find the file on your computer where you have it saved, and then hit upgrade. Now, the router will obviously update the firmware and then it will reboot. Now, if you are logged into your router through Wi-Fi, you will lose connection to your router during that phase. But once you basically see the unit and all the lights come back on, then you can re-log back into that and continue on the process from there. So right now, I will assume that the firmware is updated on your unit. Now, also, I'm not entirely sure if this particular component is compulsory. However, I do find that, especially with the Milesight hotspot, that it did require the correct date and time. So this is something that you may choose to do as well, as to update your correct time and date and for your relevant zone that you may be. So where you would do that is we'll go down to System. Then we go down to General Settings. And then from General Settings to System Time. From there, you set your zone. Of course, I'm in Brisbane. You set it for where you need, and the rest of the details, just leave them as they are. So it would actually be in sync with the server, and just hit enable, or rather save. So given the fact that you are going to be doing multiple steps here on your router, there isn't a need to reboot at this point, but we will be doing a reboot. All right, so the next step that we'll run through is actually an option step. If you recall, I mentioned that I do remote access into my hotspots. I remote access into my Sensecap, and I can do a full reboot of my hotspot. I can do a turbo sync and all of the other functionality through the Sensecap console that I would be able to do if the unit was sitting in front of me. But in order to do that, we need to activate remote access. So let's run through those steps. All right, so first of all, we go to Network. Then we go down to Firewall. And here we are on the security screen. So all you need to do is actually to activate the HTTP, which should have defaulted to 80, have that ticked, and HTTPS 443 have that ticked as well. So through having both of these boxes ticked, what it's going to enable you to do is log into your router so that you can do a reboot or a reconfigure of your router if you feel that your router has developed a problem. And we're talking about remote access systems here. Obviously, if the router's in your house, then you don't need to set remote access. But if it is away from home, I would encourage you to set both of these to remote. Now, I do want to reinforce that I'm not a networking expert, and I do recognize that through opening certain ports does increase your susceptibility of your system to hackers and the like. Now, given obviously on a remote access router, the only thing connected to it is a hotspot. It's not like they can hack into my computer and steal any sensitive information. If you were running the router at home, you would definitely want to get a little bit better advice from somebody who knows what they're talking about with networking and network security. So this is an optional step. As I say, I do it with my systems, but it is definitely not mandatory in order to set port forwarding and static IP. Now, there will be another section that we need to come back to. We'll have a look at that at a moment, where we actually go and put some instructions into our port forwarding so that, in fact, when you remote access into your router, that you'll be able to do it. Now, I am going to remote access right at the very end. I'm going to remote access into one of my hotspots that I have located in a different part of Brisbane. But I'll do that right at the very end so you can see how this whole process works end to end. Okay, so the first step that we're going to want to do in the networking side so that we can actually do that port forwarding is to set that static IP in the unit. Now, the static IP is just basically, it allows your hotspot or the network with your hotspot to be able to know where to find you. Now, in the last video, I did actually make a bit of a slip, because I think if you've watched the first video, you may have heard me talking about the network, the peer-to-peer network whisper to one another. Or maybe they do whisper, but in fact, what they're doing, the term is actually gossiping. And the peer-to-peer network is basically how we convey our status and our data and all of the things that are going on inside the unit. And the best way for that to happen in an effective manner is to have a static IP address and your ports open. That way, the other peers that are out there on the network, when they go looking for you to issue you with a challenge, or they are receiving a challenge from somebody else, they're receiving a beacon and they need to send it back to you, they know where to find you on your router. Now, this is not a static IP for your router, as I was mistakenly thinking when I first actually started using the 4G routers. So thank you, Mäthÿ, for setting me straight. But in fact, the static IP is just that address inside the router. So what we need to do is put the MAC address. So it's to get to this window here, it was DCP, DCHP, and it will already default to the DHCP server, but if for some reason it's defaulted to one of the other screens, then you just click the DHCP server. Right, so on here, we need to set the static IP address. Now, your MAC address is the MAC address that is on the bottom of your hotspot. So I don't know if you can see in my little screen here, and of course everything's connected up by wires, but on here there are a couple of addresses, and one of them is an ETH MAC address and the other one is a WLAN MAC address. You want the Ethernet address. That's because you're connecting it via Ethernet. So you want your MAC address for your particular hotspot to be placed into the MAC address. Now, your IP address over here is going to be the address, the IP address for the for the particular hotspot on inside of your router. So it's the static IP address, and this IP address can be any IP address within the router that you choose. So it will typically be between the start address here is 192.168.1.100, and it goes through to 199 in my particular configurations, which I think is the default settings. If it's not the default settings, then you just choose something that is within the start and the end address, and you can make it anything in the middle that's not being used by any other device. And given the fact that you're setting up a 4G router that is remote access only for your hotspot, there won't be any other devices to choose from, so you won't have to worry about clashing with any other IP address. So you put your IP address into there and you click the save button. Now we move on to set the port forwarding. The port forwarding obviously gives that clear line of traffic so that those other peers out there, they already know where to find you on your router because you've got your static IP that doesn't change, but now the port needs to be open so that you can have free and uninterrupted traffic stream. Without this, you will be operating in relayed, which means that the effectiveness of your unit is questionable. It does not mean that you will earn less HNT. It might. It just makes your connection a whole lot less stable. You're more prone to losing HNT and connection and everything else. Right, so to set your 44158, we want to go to Network. Then we want to go to Firewall. Then we want to go to Port Mapping. So here in Port Mapping, you need to enter some information. You need to tell your router the port number that you want the traffic to be directed to when it comes in looking for your hotspot, and that port number is 44158. So in the source IP, it will be 44158. The destination IP address will be the IP address that you selected as the static IP address in the prior step. A destination port will be 44158. Protocol is going to be TCP, and the description is something that you can choose to use yourself. It just basically, Helium allows you to identify what this actually is. The source IP you can leave exactly as it is. Now, this second area down here that I have placed information into, this is the optional step. This is for that remote access to your hotspot should you want to be able to remote access into Sensecap hotspot. It only works with the Sensecap hotspot because the Sensecap dashboard actually provides you with the public IP address for your router. Unfortunately, for all of the other hotspots that are out there, that is not available. So consequently, you won't be able to log into your router because you won't know the IP address because it's not static IP. Okay, this is the router. Now, funny enough, I suppose it would potentially work with the Optus given the fact that you have got a static IP. Puzzling. I'll need to think on that. Anyway, for now, we'll just work on the fact that we're working on my Telstra SIM. So the second details that you put in here, once again, source IP is all zeros. Just leave it as it is. The source port is 80 because if you think back to that port was 80 back on the security screen that you've ticked that available, you need to tell the router where you're wanting it to go to. So, or rather for the destination IP address, destination IP address is also 80 TCP. So and then the description here is hotspot, because when you now put your IP address into your screen, as I will demonstrate at the end, it's going to take you directly to your hotspot control panel. And I'll show you how you can also access your router. So now we'll move on to actually putting the last piece of information into your router so that your hotspot will function correctly. And that is we're going to put the APN code in. Now, remembering that APN code has come from either Optus or Telstra. It's a code provided by them. In this particular case, we'll be using the Telstra code. So we go to the interface, or rather to network, then we go to interface, and then we go over to cellular. And over here in cellular, you will find there is an area where we've got APN. So in my particular case, this is a Telstra SIM, so I have Telstra.extranet. If this was an Optus SIM, I would have whatever it was it Optus Business IP. In my particular case, could be different for yourself. Once you have put those details in there, you just click on Save. Okay, so once you have put all of those details into your router, there's one final step, and this is a step that is consistent across all routers when you have placed in your port forwarding rules and static IP. Before they take effect, you must actually do a reboot of your hotspot. So right now, I'm going to do a reboot of this hotspot. We're going to go into maintenance, and we're going to go into reboot. So do you want to reboot your system now? Yes, I do. And away you go. So at this stage, the router has turned itself off. So if you are actually linked to this router via your Wi-Fi, you will have actually lost access to your internet. If this is your secondary router, it may have defaulted through. If you are connected via your LAN cable and you are connected to it that way, then you've probably still got internet. But right now, there is nothing else that you actually need to do with your hotspot. Everything, or whether with your router or your hotspot for that matter, everything should be set. Okay, now the final step that you want to go through is to verify that all of that information that you've just put into the router has actually worked as it should. And we want to verify that your ports are open, because if your ports are open, then everything has worked. But if the ports are showing as closed, then something has gone wrong and you need to go through the settings again. Because in the scenario that we are working with here, we are, and regardless if it is Optus or whether it is Telstra, we are working with a network that we know actually does allow port forwarding and to have your port 44158 open. With some other ISPs, this may be closed, but anyway, let's go. So we go to portchecker.co. It'll come up with your IP address. Click on use that current IP address just to verify, I guess, and then click on the check button, and it will show if your port 44158 is open. And in this particular case, hey presto, the port is open. Now, if I did not have the APN code, or if I was to go back into my router now and turn off the APN code, this port, in fact, if I was using the Telstra SIM, I would not be able to utilize the SIM at all because it just doesn't function. If I was using the Optus SIM without the APN, this port would be closed. So that APN is critical to tell the network what you're doing, and it obviously you're joining what you've arranged through Telstra or Optus Small Business Manager through your router, and you're making it all work. So 44158, there you go. Hey presto, you are done. You have now set up your Milesight router. All right, so let's just recap on each of those steps. And this is what we've just run through. So we'd actually downloaded the software. We got that. We connected your hotspot, we corrected your router to your computer via a LAN port or via Wi-Fi, and you connected your hotspot to your router via Ethernet. Ethernet is always far more preferable than Wi-Fi. Then you access the control panel. The URL for the Milesight UR32 is always going to be 192.168.1.1, and the default username is admin, and the default password is password, but you will need to obviously set that the first time you go in there, so the password will always be whatever you call it, and you could have even changed the username if you want from admin. Then you go through to your firmware update. You set your date and time. You do your optional step of setting up your remote access. Then you do your static IP. You do your port forward. You set your APN, and you reboot the router, and then it works. So right now, I'd actually like to demonstrate actually utilizing this remote access going into one of my hotspots that is located in a different suburb. Okay, well, in order to be able to access your hotspot and your router via remote access, you're first of all going to need to identify the public IP address. And that's why Sensecap M1 are such an integral part of this particular operation, because the Sensecap dashboard actually displays the public IP address for your hotspot and also for your router. If you did not have this bit of information here, then you would not be able to actually log in to be able to do those functions on your hotspot from a remote location. If you reset your router at any point, this public IP address will change. So that's why this Sensecap dashboard is absolutely a godsend for this particular component. So what we need to do is take the URL and we need to put that into our browser. Okay, so once you have popped that into your browser, what you will find is that it takes you directly to the Sensecap M1 local console. Now, I'm going to assume the fact that you have already entered into the Sensecap M1 console previously from a unit that you've actually had in your home, in your hands at the time. So we're not going to run through that here today, but once you put the CPU ID and the password in there and then you log in, you are then able to do a full reboot. You can reset the blocks, you can reset the router, reset the hotspot. All of the functionality that you normally find on the console will be available to you remotely, which is absolutely so amazing when your hotspots do fall behind at some point through no fault of your own, and quite often to wait for it to resync is a many-day process, but in this case you can get it back up and running virtually straight away. So there you go. That is how to get into your Sensecap M1 from a remote location. Now let's check out your router. Okay, so once you've got the HTTPS / the IP address, hit enter, and here you are at your Milesight router dashboard. Now this is exactly the same dashboard that you would have if you were actually sitting in front of the unit. So the admin or the username that you have selected, if not by default, and then the username. Once you click on the login, it will take you into that particular router. Okay, and here you are on the dashboard. Now, you're actually on your overview screen. Now, from here, you can actually see if your link is still in use. The fact that you've been able to remote into your computer remote into your router already tells you the fact that you do have internet now. But what you may find is if you look at the connection duration, and in this particular case, it's been online for 7 days, but if that maybe it'd only been online for an hour or 2 hours, then it would tell you that at some point recently, 2 hours ago, the router went through a reboot or was offline or whatever it may be. So that's just all methods of problem solving. And from here, there's obviously very little reason for you to change any of your settings remotely, but if you needed to, well, you could set them all through here. Okay, so guys, just wrapping it up now, just coming back to reinforce the fact that a 4G system does work every bit as good as your home NBN connection would be, providing you have got a good quality router and you've got all of your settings correct. The Milesight, the UR32, as I've stressed multiple times here today, guys, is my preferred option. And the reason that it's my preferred option is primarily because of that remote access functionality. I'll be covering the other options in follow-up videos, but I just thought I'd bring it back to the map here for a moment. This is my attractive Fern Mule. This is one of my hotspots. It is actually located at a friend's place, only about a kilometer, less than a kilometer away from my own residence. Now, when I set it up there, I didn't want to impact on his internet. So I actually set it up through a 4G router. And in fact, the router that it is working through is, you guessed it, it is the Milesight router. So this is actually showing the fact that my results here are every bit as good as any NBN or other form of internet that it may be. So guys, there you have it. Hopefully you got something out of this particular video. 4G is such a hot topic. The network is growing across the country, and obviously placing your hotspot in the best location for coverage doesn't always equal where there is an NBN connection available to you. So having 4G, it really does add a lot of additional flexibility and freedom to your Helium setup. If I could ask you once again, guys, to Subscribe to the video if you haven't already. If you've watched it right through to this stage, I'm really hoping that you got something out of this. And if you haven't hit the thumbs up button, guys, if I could ask you to hit that for me right now, whether it helps the algorithm or not, it just reinforces to myself the fact that you're enjoying the content. Guys, there is absolutely no financial gain to myself. I don't have any affiliates with Milesight or with Sam that I'm getting any sort of kickback here. This is all just about providing information that will hopefully help you to create a stronger Helium setup, so that our network is as strong as it can possibly be for all of us. Now, in the bottom of this video, I would encourage you to reach our community, reach out to our community if you are not part of our Facebook group. Guys, we have got an enormous Facebook early adopters group that was founded back about 12 months ago by Bryce down in Sydney, and that Facebook group now has got near on 7,000 people, potentially more than that. All I know is, as a moderator of the group, we have anywhere from maybe 15 to 30 new people joining a day. It's absolutely huge growth. So come and join us on the Facebook group. It's a huge asset of people. We also have our AU915 Discord channel. Now, if you've got technical questions, guys, this is the place to go. Whilst the Facebook group is great, what I can tell you is that the resource of people that spend a lot of time on Discord is absolutely astounding. So join our AU915 Discord group. Just come on. Both the links are in the group below this, so I'd really encourage you to jump on board. I've also put the details for the IoT store down there. If you don't already have yourself a Milesight router, as far as I'm aware, Sam is the only distributor for the Milesight router in Australia. I do actually believe that you can purchase these directly from the manufacturer as well, but obviously coming from offshore, whilst you might save yourself a couple of dollars, guys, what I can tell you through my own experience is you will actually develop a lot more heartache, because trying to deal with offshore companies, especially when the companies are in China, is very problematic at times. And sometimes you can actually be paying more in the end once you pay shipping, insurance. Sometimes you'll get caught for GST at the other end. So at least if you're purchasing through the IoT store, you know what you're getting. The bottom line is there on the website for you to look at. Alrighty, guys. I hope, as I say once again, I hope you've got something out of this. I will look forward to seeing you on a future video. I will look forward to seeing you on Facebook or on Discord, wherever it may be. Have a safe day. I hope your Helium journey is going absolutely off right now, and I will see you real soon. Helium Down Under out.